me now. The Jewish feast of the Passover could not begin while the sun was shining, not until the first 3 stars of evening had appeared. A small group of men were already nearing the gates of the city, a city filled to overflowing with the Jewish faithful. They were on their way to the house of a friend to share the Passover meal. For them, it would be an end and a beginning. The sun was about to disappear. The darkness could be held back no longer. The celebration must begin. The sight in the temple courtyard could not be romanticized. It was appalling. Over 200,000 lambs had been sacrificed today. Their innocent blood flowed over the altar incessantly for hours. Tonight, they would become the shared meal for all of Israel's children. 2 of Jesus' disciples, Peter and John, had spent most of the afternoon preparing this borrowed room for the Passover meal. It must never be forgotten that the followers of Jesus were deeply and fiercely Jewish. And on the 15th Nisan, in the Jewish year 3790, all Jews celebrated the Passover. The men who came here did not come as Christian saints to create a new sacrament. They came as devoted Jews to obey the command of Moses. And if indeed they were to ever become saints, with their likenesses forever cast in the strange glow of stained glass, their actions during the next few hours would have never given them away.
He's starting early tonight, John.
Don't worry about Judas, Peter. Jesus sees right through him.
He's after the head seat.
Don't worry about it. Jesus knows who worked all day today to get things ready for tonight.
Yeah. Who? Who stood in line for 4 hours today at the temple?
It was your turn. I waited last year.
Last year, James sacrificed the lamb.
Well, I stood in line 1 year. Besides, someone with an eye for beauty and a little class had to fix this place up.
So you're going to get the seat of honor because you've got beauty and class?
No. I'm going to sit next to the master because he likes me.
Jesus likes just about everybody. Did you go? Except hypocrites.
Simon?
Do you remember who Jesus said he was going to give the keys to his kingdom to?
Yeah, probably to keep you outside at the gates. I'll tell you something, Simon. Excuse me, Peter. Even Jesus doesn't enjoy the smell of stale fish.
John, you spent just as much time on those boats as I did.
Yes. But I just didn't bring my work home with me. Here. And don't raise your voice, Simon. The master doesn't like it.
If you're looking for saints, you may be in for a long wait. No one knows for sure who got the seat of honor to the left of Jesus that night. There's some evidence that Jesus gave the honored position to Judas. If so, it must certainly have been a lesson the disciples would never forget. We do know that John took the seat to Jesus' right, while Peter most likely sat across from John. Peter did not accept the lower position gracefully. The Passover meal began with the first of 4 cups of wine. As the host, Jesus himself took the cup and blessed it. Blessed art thou, Jehovah our God, who has created the fruit of the vine. Amen. For a brief moment, Jesus glanced around the table, studying the faces of these friends he loved. Then he said, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. Take this and share it among yourselves. For I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. These words were new. They weren't in the script. To the Jew, the Passover Seder was the most familiar of all celebrations. It is no wonder that the group was puzzled and surprised at these new words of Jesus.
Of course we were surprised. The Passover liturgy was not to be meddled with. Everyone knew that. Some things simply must not be changed. Even so, it was not the first time Jesus had threatened our orthodoxy. Lately, our religious leaders wanted nothing to do with Jesus. Make no mistake about this man. He was a fiery revolutionary who shook our religious and civil establishments to their very foundations. And no foundation was more firmly established in Jewish culture than the Passover meal. It was like a rock. The Romans could come and take our land, tax our houses. The sun could burn up our crops, but the Passover, the Paschal meal stood. It held. Now Jesus was changing even that. It was not easy for us. Our orthodoxy was cracking. I guess we were frightened. Because when it was gone, there would be nothing left to lean on. Nothing but him.
This night was to be full of the unexpected, full of once missing pieces to a puzzle as old as time. But the behavior of Simon, the one Jesus called Peter, was as predictable as his temper.
Simon, this is a holiday. You can cheer up now.
Is something wrong, Simon? Are you sick?
If it weren't for me fighting the crowds in the temple, we'd have no meal tonight.
I know that. So?
So tell me why Judas always sits in the head seat.
Because he's the treasurer, Simon. He's supposed to.
Well, John's not the treasurer, and look where he's sitting.
Why do you always sit there, John?
Answer him, John, when I'm the one who does all the work.
And I'm usually the one who has to do it over again.
That's not true.
Well, if we're going to spend our Passover meal arguing about who sits where, Matthew is the oldest member of our group, and that should count for
Nothing. That should count for exactly nothing.
Maybe I should remind you, Simon, that I was the one who introduced you to Jesus in the first
Stay out
place.
of this, Andrew.
Well, how about that, Simon? He has as much right as anyone.
He's my brother. My little brother. And he'll sit where I tell him to sit.
You won't tell me anything. I'll sit where I like.
Nobody else here has ever walked on water. It happened so many times. I used to wonder why Jesus ever asked me to come with him in the first place. He used to give real good talks. Everybody wanted to be with him just to see what he was going to say next. He could have had anyone he wanted for a friend. But I figured if someone like him wanted to be friends with someone like me, then I'd be a fool not to follow him. I guess Jesus didn't appreciate pride very much. But sometimes it made me feel real important just being with him. Like when we would walk into Capernaum and there'd be these big crowds of people just trying to get a look at Jesus. Sometimes I'd spot some of my friends from the fish market in the crowd. And there I'd be, standing right next to Jesus. And him talking to me like I was somebody. I have to admit it. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I guess that's what the disturbance was about that night. See, I knew I wasn't the brightest person in the world. I was a good fisherman. Real good. But I didn't know much about anything else. I remember when I was younger and I used to go to a party, he'd always give me a seat at the back of the room. I'd sit there and I'd watch these lawyers and businessmen walk past me. They didn't even see me. Like I wasn't even there. They'd walk up to their places of honor and everybody would smile at them and congratulate them. I knew I'd never be like that. Made me feel real bad sometimes. Something I guess I just never got used to. So on this one night, I thought that just once old Simon the fisherman could have the seat of honor. And I could go back to Capernaum and tell the wife and children about the time that Jesus gave me the head seat at the Passover. Well, Jesus could be very hard on you. He had a real sad way of settling our argument that night. After he got us all quiet, Jesus started acting real strange. He stood up, took off his upper garment, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Like a slave. Then he got a tub of water and walked over to where I was sitting. He sat down beside me and he reached for my sandals. All at once I realized that Jesus, the man that I believed was the Messiah, he was going to wash my feet. Well, I pulled away. Couldn't let him do that. That was the kind of thing a slave would do. I told him outright that He was never going to wash my feet. He could have gotten mad again. But instead he looked at me real patient. And he said, Simon, if I don't wash you, you have no part with me. And then he just waited. Like he was waiting for me to say, all right. I couldn't look at him while he was doing it. I was embarrassed. Everyone was watching. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do, letting him do that. I started thinking about all the times with Jesus, and how I admired him, looked up to him, almost worshipped him at times. And there he was, washing my feet. Right then, more than anything, I wanted him to know that no matter what, I did want to be with him. I did want to be his person. I was never any good at saying things right. But I leaned over and I whispered, Lord, not just my feet. After it was over, he looked at me real quietly and politely. He said, Simon, do you know what I've done? I couldn't answer him. But I understood.
The first course of the Passover meal, what we would call an appetizer, was bitter herbs wrapped in unleavened bread. Like everything in the Passover meal, it was symbolic. Bitter herbs were to remind the Jew of the bitterness of their slavery in Egypt. Tonight, Jesus was to use the herbs in a way that would stun his followers. One of you, he said, is going to betray me.
Oh. Who, Master?
Jesus answered, his hand is with me this moment on the table.
Ask him who it is.
Lord, who is it?
Jesus whispered to John, the one to whom I give the dipped sop.
have I?
Surely not I.
You have said it yourself, Judas.
What you do quickly.
There will be people, a great many people, I expect, will say that I betrayed the Messiah tonight. They're wrong. I didn't betray him. He betrayed himself. All of us knew it was over. I was just the only one who decided to do anything about it. You think I wanted it to end this way? I'd followed Jesus for almost 3 years. I followed him everywhere. I got seasick in Galilee. Slept on the ground. Walked through riots in Nazareth. Went for, seemed like forever without a woman. What did it get me? We had to borrow a room for our Passover meal. Well, anyone who claims to be the Messiah had better be able to deliver the goods. A week ago, Jesus could have taken this whole city. Sure, some people would have been killed. Maybe a lot of people. But we would have been free. Instead, he makes some nebulous remark about his kingdom not being of this world. What does that mean? This is the world I know, and the world where I want to make my mark. Jesus had just taken the gamble and thrown off Rome. We'd all have been on the ground floor of a new empire. Jewish empire. But he didn't. Told me once that it wouldn't profit a man anything if he got possession of the whole world but lost his soul. Just couldn't see that there was another possibility. Maybe a man could have both. Why couldn't he see that? Instead, he talks about the last being the first, the poor being the rich, the persecuted being blessed, those who lose their lives finding it. Does that sound like a Messiah? Does it? So I got out with what I could. Not much to show for 3 years. Enough for a weekend at the ocean. Or a new robe or two. Not much. But at least it's something I can touch. Something real. Maybe it'll be enough for now.
It would not be enough for Judas. It would never be enough for any man. The Paschal meal continued. Everyone seemed more relaxed with Judas gone. Everyone but Philip. Part of the Passover liturgy called for the youngest person present to ask traditional questions of the host. And the others had never failed to remind Philip that he was the youngest.
Master, why is this night distinguished from all other nights?
The disciples waited in silence. Now it was Jesus' turn. According to tradition, the host was to tell the story of the first Passover, a story that every Jew knew by heart. Yet, it must never have been told in just the way that Jesus told it that evening. It was a story that began in slavery. Moses had demanded of the Egyptian Pharaoh that the Hebrew people be freed. Because he resisted, Jehovah brought terrible plagues upon the Egyptians. Still, Pharaoh would not let the Hebrews go. So the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this month, they are each one to take a lamb for themselves, a lamb for each household. It shall be an unblemished male, a year old, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to kill it at twilight. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. For I will go through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt." It was not a pretty story. It was not meant to be. The Jews, God's people, would never forget that redemption is costly. In Egypt, it cost the life of an innocent, unblemished, helpless male lamb. Soon, it would cost the life of a lamb infinitely more precious. And Jesus took the bread and blessed it. "Praise be thou, O God, our Lord, King of the world, who causes bread to come forth from the earth."
Amen.
This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. They did as he said, and like so many times before, they tried to understand. Some understood more than others.
I was afraid you might go back, Philip. I just didn't think it would be this soon.
I do love it here. It may be small and plain and dusty. Everything I love is here. I think Jesus needs me. I know I need him.
Philip, if your happiness is here, if our happiness is here, isn't that more important than traveling around Galilee with some itinerant rabbi?
I thought so too. Oh, Becca. There were nights in Capernaum when I was so lonely I thought I would die. Everywhere I'd look, I'd see this house, this room. I'd remember times of happiness, good friends. I think of you. All our plans got no better and got worse.
Why is it that men think that they're the only ones that know loneliness?
Becca, I
Do you know
didn't
what
mean
it's
it.
like here? Wake up in the morning, smell the flowers outside my window, hear the summer rains on my roof. Think for that one instant, life is really good. That the world is really something precious. And then remembering, Philip is gone, and the world isn't good, and Capernaum is too far away. And my father, he would keep telling me, Rebecca, there are many fine men here. Why, look at Matthias. He's handsome, he's wealthy. He'd make a fine husband. But I couldn't tell my father what was in my heart. I couldn't tell anyone. And the worst part was knowing that the love I had for you might always be there. Even when I'm old and the wife of someone handsome, wealthy.
Becca.
Philip, please stay. Nothing could be more important than your happiness.
Oh, yes. Many things. I couldn't follow Jesus just to be happy. I could never be more happy than I am here with you.
Then why?
I follow Jesus because he speaks the truth. Because he is the truth. And I think that truth must always be more important than happiness.
Don't understand. What good is truth if we can't be happy?
In the beginning, there were so many of us that were following Jesus. Some wanted food. Some wanted their health back. I guess some of them thought Jesus would bring them prosperity and position. We were all looking for happiness. You know what Jesus said about bread once? He said that the bread he was giving for the life of the world was his flesh.
Philip.
I know. That's why I left with the others. The excitement was over. Crowds were dwindling. Jesus hardly ever performed any miracles anymore. Instead, he talked more and more about death. That's why I ran, Becca.
But when Jesus was here, he talked so much about life.
I know. And I've thought about that a lot since I've been home. I still don't understand it yet. But it may be the most important thing that I do understand. Maybe life and death are all tied up together. Becca, Jesus may be asking more than I ever thought possible. And if I don't go back, I think I may never find the answers. And I have to know the answers.
What's it like in Capernaum?
It's different. Lots of people. Lots of boats. It's cooler. And in the evening, the wind comes in off the lake. And more Romans. They even have their own synagogue.
What will Philip do there?
I'm learning to fish. Peter and John are teaching me. I'm not very good. I get my nets all tangled up.
You, fisherman? I can't believe it. Oh, Philip. I'll miss you so much.
It's so easy to forget that these men had wives and fiancés and children and longings like all men. They were lonely and afraid and doubtful of the future. They were like us, just like us. That's comforting somehow. What happened during the meal, the sharing of the Paschal lamb, was of such deep significance and beauty that few of us will ever be able to see it. It was the last time that these friends would be together before Jesus' death. Some of them, like Philip, sensed that. Yet, as always, Jesus met their fears with words of comfort and understanding, words they needed very much during that dark night.
Well, I wish I could tell you what he said. I mean, I can tell you what he said, the words. But the meaning. What I heard then and keep hearing every time I remember those words. But I guess that's not up to me. Anyway, there's a big difference between what I understood then and understand now. What I understood then and now is that he loved us. He knew we didn't understand. I mean, it was obvious enough, I guess. But only he knew how deep the misunderstanding went. But he'd just keep talking to us like a parent to a child. As though he somehow knew, or at least hoped, that we'd understand someday. At first, we all tried to be more or less jovial, but it was impossible. It was like trying to be happy at a going-away party or something. How can you be happy when it seems like this party is your last time together? Jesus had decided that he was going to die soon. Well, he'd been right about everything else I could remember, so it didn't make any sense. But what could you say?
think we all began to feel worse and worse inside during the meal. Don't think I was the only one trying to fight back the tears when he said, not to be so upset. We believed in God, didn't we? So believe in him too. He said that he was going to get things ready for us. And so, of course, he'd be back for us. Things like that. It helped. It helped a lot.
And Jesus took the third of the 4 Passover cups, the one the rabbis called the cup of redemption, and he blessed it. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who feedest the whole world with goodness, with grace, and with mercy. We thank thee, O Lord our God, that thou hast caused us to inherit a goodly and pleasant land. Have mercy, O Lord our God, on Israel thy people, and on Jerusalem thy city, and upon Zion, the dwelling place of thy glory, and upon thy altar, and upon the temple. Blessed art thou, O Lord, thou who buildest Jerusalem. Amen. This cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood, which is to be shed on behalf of many for forgiveness of sins. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. Father, the hour has come. Glorify thy Son, that the Son may glorify thee. Holy Father, I have given them thy word, and the world has hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. I do not ask thee to take them out of the world, but to keep them from the evil one. I do not ask in behalf of these alone, but for those also who believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, even as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be in us, I in them, and thou in me, that they may be perfected in unity, that the world may know that thou didst send me, and didst love them, even as thou didst love me. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friend.